I think because like you toe the line of potentially becoming racist, basically.
I don't care about disrespecting cultures personally.
So,
Well, no, it's a load of bull.
no, it's not because meditation works. Doshas, we've tested them, are absolute hogwash. I've mostly just
Okay,
found
wait. Sorry, listen, I'm going to have to cut in here because you're going off at a million miles an hour with complete bullshit, okay?
No, I'm not doing that at all.
No, you are. No.
You need to know that if you're levying these critiques.
Why are you being so condescending?
You've been condescending to me almost this whole conversation.
No,
to be honest.
I haven't been condescending to you at all. You've insinuated that I'm racist earlier.
Did I ask you for any of your qualifications?
No, I'd just like to know, because if you want to take the expertise and act all pretentious with me, you can tell me what your qualifications are.
What I'm saying is that the reason it seems that you're fundamentally misunderstanding my arguments is because you don't know the process of hypothesis generation, which you can just Google. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Just listening to some rap music.
Yeah, thanks for being patient with me. That was quite the issue. Figured it out though.
What was going on?
Not totally sure. I updated it and then it chain crashed. And so did a driver update, and then once I ran it as administrator, it seemed to fix itself. And I shouldn't say me, I had lots of techs here.
Okay. No, that's cool. Well, hello. What's happening? What's going on?
I'm just letting my Discord know that I'm going live because I let you know right away. Yeah, how are you? How's your stream going? Have you come across any good tea? You're the guy to ask about the tea.
Yeah, well, there's some stuff going on with this artesian builds. Maybe companies somewhat taking advantage of unaware small streamers and then kind of mocking their figures on stream somewhat. BX Bullet, Mr. Girl stuff. Oh, could I get a comment from you on Mr. Girl getting banned from Twitch?
My comment? In general, I think banning people broadly for like dumb shit. I think it's for his POCD video, right?
No, yeah, that's the best guess so far, but we're not 100% sure.
Yeah, so it's just like, what is he banned for? You know, It feels like maybe like witch hunt territory of just like big streamers like kind of slamming him potentially with reports. And I just think that that's gross. I just am not a big cancel culture person myself, so.
Yeah, well, the person that seemingly started all this, BX Bullet, is supposed to be one of these kind of someone somewhat on the right who is against the cancel culture stuff, but they were kind of tweeting about it, and it looks like that potentially instigated some of what's been going on. So yeah, it's a bit bad already, but
Yeah, it's unfortunate because overall, I actually, for the most part, like Mr. Girl as far as like what he does in the space. I don't love all of his psych takes, but that's fine. Like I don't love everyone's takes on everything. So, but I think the precedent of just like canceling somebody with like no reason or anything feels bad.
yeah, I mean, I don't think he is a nonce, as they say in England.
No, and like the reality is like, to be honest, like we need to have nuanced conversations about pedophilia, like we just do. And I don't know. I listened to the POCD video. I didn't find too much that I was like, whoa, he pushed back where I think was like smart to push back. And I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I guess, what, are we talking about the Dr. K stuff then and the science aspect, or what is it you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about science, Dr. K a little bit, but more about like pseudoscience and mental health, particularly overall. I think a lot of people feel like I'm a big defender of Dr. K, which actually is ironic because all I've done is mostly critiques made against him of being like, these aren't the greatest critiques, and I've levied critiques against him. That's literally, I think, all I've done. And I think I've said he broadly seems to be like a decently solid psychiatrist who's well trained and seems to have decent efficacy with his clients.
How do you know that though?
Oh, well, he's trained by Harvard and then was hired by Harvard. So like that's a pretty good reference of skill by itself, I would say.
I just wonder if that's because you seem to suggest that you've got some insight into how he treats his clients.
No, I wouldn't say how he treats his clients broadly. I would say, like, if Harvard has somebody hired to be training their future doctors, I would presume that they've vetted him quite well to ensure that he treats his clients well and has decent efficacy and ethical practice with his clients.
Oh, okay. I just
Because
think,
that's just a standard of Harvard, I expect, right? And like maybe we can call Harvard into question then, but it's like, okay, well now we're like calling all of Harvard into question, which we can do. It's just that's a much larger claim. You need a lot more evidence to prove that, you know?
sure, it just, yeah, it just seems like there's a lot of faith being put in just the reputation of Harvard. I mean, what vetting would they do? I mean, I'm not trying to say like Dr. K bad in terms of his private practice and putting that to one
Yeah.
side, but I just feel like appealing to Harvard just because it's Harvard and saying, well, they're a good university, they're going to do the vetting. Like, do you have any insight into like how they vet people or anything along those lines?
I don't personally, but I don't work for Harvard Medicine, right? It's a bit of that like wanting to broadly trust authorities, and like I'm all for also questioning the authorities. It's just like that becomes a pretty extraordinary claim, and so like with extraordinary claims, you just need extraordinary evidence. So if the evidence comes out that like Dr. K is a terrible practitioner, Harvard is actively hiring people without vetting them well, all this stuff, like if all this comes out, like that's really important to come out. I'm not opposed to that. It's just you need a large portion of evidence to prove that because there is kind of this historical precedent of Harvard being an Ivy League, high tier, high level of empiricism hospital and education center.
Sure. I mean, I just, I think that if you look at, I'm sure, I mean, off the top of my head, you know, I don't know about like the intricacies of like bad doctors and where they've trained, but I'm just not sure if like the credibility of the institution they're trained at has any bearing on how they practice. And I would question it further with someone like Dr. K specifically, just because he talks about blending in Ayurvedic practices in his private practice, and that is a bit of a red flag for me personally. But I'm sure we can maybe get a bit into
Yeah,
that.
and to be honest, that's a red flag that I would say I broadly actually agreed with you on. As far as him kind of saying, like, the reason why I'm such an excellent doctor is because of my Ayurvedic practice. And I'm like, honestly, there isn't a ton of evidence to substantiate that. Probably you're just being like false humble. And the reason you're maybe if you're having better numbers, which is just what he's claiming, but let's give it the benefit of the doubt, just for this case, assume that that's true, then it's probably not Ayurveda. It's probably that you're a better practitioner, maybe than your coworkers, right? Like that would be a more Occam's razor assumption that I would have. And I think like the false modesty in putting it on Ayurveda is probably because of like bias towards Ayurveda, um, which I just don't
Yeah,
think is super
sure.
wise.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that the reality of it is that, yeah, I mean, I think maybe we just disagree on it, but I just don't know if like appealing to Harvard, like maybe, sure, as a default, I would say yes, like they would probably vet people, perfectly fine. But I think when you're looking at like some of the Ayurvedic stuff, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like would they be permissive of that? Would they be okay with him talking about Ayurveda to this sort of level? Um,
Do you
and
think the
yeah,
prestige of an institution though like doesn't really matter?
um,
Like it's meaningless more or less?
well, I'm not saying it's meaningless. I just don't know if you can appeal to it in its totality when you're talking about like an individual actor as an outcome of that or working for that institution.
Yeah, that I suppose that's potentially fair. I just like I guess I don't want to like engage in like I guess I just want to elucidate that nuance because I don't want to like engage in um like the appeal to authority is cringe, but there's also a time and place where it's not fallacious, right? Like we trust experts because broadly they've been vetted to be experts, and then if it is the case that they're giving bad information, the burden of evidence seems to be a little bit higher to prove that like somebody who's like a professional doctor is maybe whack compared to like a lay person being unempirical.
Okay. So did you have any like specific critiques or issues with the coverage that I've done about Dr. K?
Yeah, yes, I did. So I was a little, so I think that we can either start with what was good or what was bad, whatever you prefer.
Okay.
Um, do you have a
Let's get the good
preference?
stuff out of the way first.
Okay. Maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll save one of them and then we can have a nice sandwich, a
Okay.
nice shit sandwich.
Oh yeah, the old classic.
Yeah. So where you said in the video, I think you explicitly said, Dr. K says that I'm not better than my colleague, and you basically attack him for this claim. Because he said, I'm better than my colleagues because I use Ayurveda. And you're basically like, you attack him for that claim. And I think that's a really good idea because I also would agree that there's no evidence to me that broadly he's going to be significantly better because of purely his Ayurveda. More likely, when you're outperforming your coworkers in your clinical work, it's because you're a better practitioner for multitudes of factors. But we see this in psychology, right? If we actually look at efficaciousness of psychologists, they range. There are certainly psychologists that perform better and worse, and there's multiple factors that go into what causes people to be better at performing, but to claim it's because of like more or less like somewhat of a like your spiritual bend would be to me like a Christian counselor being like, yeah, the reason I'm better at counseling is because I'm a Christian counselor. And I'm like, or maybe you're just really talented at counseling and the Christian thing is something that you add and maybe it helps some of your clients. But yeah, it feels like a false modesty thing, and I just think it's wrong. And I don't like false modesty. I just find it very annoying. And disingenuous, yeah.
Okay. So did you want to do it one at a time? Do you want to do a shit sandwich? You know. By the way, a shit sandwich is not the best way to give feedback. I don't know if you know that or not.
I mean, I don't like shit sandwiches. I was mostly memeing you there.
Okay, that's fine. But yeah, just
let's
go
see.
ahead.
Okay.
Say something good or something bad, whatever you want to say.
Okay, credence he's lending it, even unintentionally, could possibly lead people to further explore it on the belief that it is more credible than it is regarding Ayurveda. I would say that that is also a good point because it's not hard to go online and find bad YouTube videos of not great Ayurveda, a very pseudoscientific Ayurveda. I've got a link in here. I can send it to you, but I'm sure you've seen more than I have of bad Ayurvedic advice that is deeply pseudoscientific. And I would agree with you. I think that that's also a really good challenge is that if you see Harvard on his shirt and you assume the prestige of the institution somewhat on him, because I think that's broadly how we interpret individuals in some part, and he's talking a lot about Ayurvedic practices, you're going to give more weight behind it. It would be the same if a Harvard doctor talked a lot about any other form of treatment, right? Even if it's a legitimate treatment or not, if you hear a doctor talking about it, you're going to be open to exploring it more. And I think that that's true, particularly when it seems like the evidence for Ayurveda is mixed, mostly because Ayurveda is a super huge branch of medicine, right? Which means that there are practices that we are finding empirical evidence for, and there are practices that we are absolutely finding zero empirical evidence for, if not even harmful, like some of the medicine you found that had like high levels of like cyanide and lead and stuff in them.
I mean, when you say Ayurveda is mixed, I think it's more so that like there's maybe some practices within it that might have some benefit. But then if you test that and it turns out that that's legitimate, you can just take it out of the framework of Ayurveda and just have it as a normal treatment or a normal piece of medicine. So I don't know.
But why do you need to like denigrate? Why do you need to denigrate the entire like? I don't. It feels strange to me to like take, for example, something like acupuncture, and there seems to be like some evidence in support of it, particularly in comparison with placebo. We have no idea why, to be honest. It's not something that theoretically we probably would have come to in allopathic medicine, right? But it seems to have some positive effects, particularly for people with chronic pain. There is some effect sizes for it. And so the issue is that if we just take it and then we just call it our medicine, right? It's just medicine, but all of Ayurveda is still pseudoscience and quackery. It's honestly like really disrespectful to the culture that created it.
I don't care about disrespecting cultures personally.
Like at all?
No, why would I be?
I think because like you toe the line of potentially becoming racist, basically.
Oh, okay. Do you think I'm being racist in any way?
I don't know if I'm definitely not going to assume a major trait about you based on like a video and like
Okay.
2 brief conversations. Yeah.
Sure. It just there's this tendency people have sometimes, and don't think you're doing it. Maybe you're touching on it, but it's this idea of like implying or pointing towards like some sort of bad trait that someone has in something they say, even though they're not explicitly doing it. So it's kind of like the idea that because like I don't respect the idea that, oh, well, Ayurveda is an Indian practice, and by criticizing it or saying that you're going to take something out of it, you're being disrespectful to the culture. Like, I don't really think that's racist. To me, that's just like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, why?
Well, if it's like, if you're saying like one culture is like Like I guess it's kind of like you got to own the extent where you're like you got to say your positions with your chest. Like you can say that one culture is just demonstrably better than another. You could say that. You just have to own the implications of what that means. Like there is an element of racism that can come with that potentially, or at least
Yeah.
ethnocentrism, maybe even xenophobia. Like there's a lot of extents where it's go, which is why I'm saying I don't know if you're racist. I have no idea. Like at all, because sometimes people also have inconsistent beliefs where they say one thing that's like, oh, that doesn't sound great, but they're like actively also not racist, right?
Sure. So the way I'd respond to that is that, I mean, firstly, I would be critical of any pseudoscience, regardless of where it came from. Even in my Dr. K video, I was critical of homeopathy, which I think comes from Germany
Mm-hmm.
originally. So yeah, I don't know. I find it's weird how like I could be critical of homeopathy and no one's going, oh, what about the German roots of it? And, you're being unfair to the Germans, etc. But then when I criticize Ayurveda, it's all about, the cultural practice and the fact it's from India and stuff like that. It just doesn't really make sense to me. I think, there's some stuff from India which presumably is fantastic in terms of medicine and we should, embrace that. But I just don't like this idea that because it comes from Ayurveda, we have to pay some respect to it coming from Ayurveda, even though broadly it is largely considered a pseudoscience and it's not really worth considering in its totality.
Right. I guess the issue for me is that it's not the criticism of Ayurveda as a whole. It's the problem of saying if it works, it's ours. It's just modern medicine. If it doesn't work, it's quackery. It's Ayurvedic medicine. That's the distinction
Why
that
do
doesn't
you?
feel honest.
I
Because
don't.
I
But
think it's scientifically dishonest, to be honest.
I don't. I'm not. I'm not saying that like science. What do you mean by science is ours? Who? What do you mean when I? What do you think I'm saying? Like when you say that? When you say thinking that medicine is ours?
Well, I would say dominantly medicine is somewhat like um, upheld and broadly pushed within Western countries, which, to be honest, I'm for. I like modern medicine. The
Well, yeah,
problem is
because the.
that when modern medicine
Hmm.
takes ideas from certain cultural roots and we indoctrinate them into medicine, but then we call that all of the rest of that culture quackery, and we don't give any credence to being like some Ayurvedic practices do have scientific merit, yoga, meditation, right?
Well, wait
There's
a
a fair bit
second.
of evidence behind
You say
ashwagandha.
it's ashwagandha. I don't know about that. I'm very
Oh, there's
skeptical
a
of
lot.
that claim.
I can give you. There's actually a fair bit of
Okay. I
evidence
mean,
for
I didn't see
ashwagandha. It's not a
anything when I looked into
panacea.
it. I
That's
didn't
fair.
see anyone when I looked into it, but by all means, I'll double check that. But I think the thing is, there's lots of plants, for example, where we find
Mhm.
out, hey, actually there is some medical benefit to like this particular plant or this particular compound, and then it
Yeah.
gets tested and it gets implemented into medicine. But like, I don't understand what you mean when we say like our medicine. Like to me, like there's a group of doctors in India that are pushing back against Ayurveda, and they want this, as you would call it, this Western medicine. So like, where does that fit into like what you're saying? If they are
Because
kind
I
of desperate
think
for this too.
Western medicine demonstrably has evidence that it treats most things better overall. It's had tons and tons. We've tested lots of what you said, Western medicine, and it's proven to be efficacious. So I'm totally fine with most cultures wanting to adopt whatever we're coining as Western medicine if the evidence is behind it. The issue is that if we take an entire culture's form of medicine, we call it quackery, but the few pieces of it that are valid, we say, no, that's good, but that's just medicine. It's disrespectful of the culture.
Okay. I think my issue with that is that like the problem you've got and the reason I think you have to separate it out is because if you give credence to it, like the thing is, like with Ayurveda, for example, it makes excessive claims. It would, my belief is it would make excessive claims about what that particular practice is. And things like meditation, yes, there's some merit to the idea that meditation is beneficial for mental health, but it's nowhere
Mm-hmm.
near the level that like Hinduism says it is. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that often these structures of like alternative medicine will make excessive claims about stuff which does have some merit, but it's to
Mm-hmm.
excess. And I think that giving credence to saying, oh, well, meditation works, but we need to pay respect to Hinduism. Well, no, we pay respect to whatever aspect works. We don't have to pay respect to Hinduism as a whole if it's making claims that aren't scientifically grounded.
Validating a part of it doesn't give credence to the whole. It gives credence to the parts that you validate.
Well, sure, but then why are you saying that you've got to be respectful to Ayurveda as a whole when Ayurveda as a whole is...
I didn't say you have to be
Okay,
respectful to Ayurveda as a whole. I
well,
said we have
what...
to disentangle the good and the bad parts, and the parts of Ayurvedic medicine that's pseudoscientific. Like I've listed several of them, and there's more of them that I'm sure you and I would agree on, right? Especially when they make extraordinary claims, right? It's that there are also parts of Ayurvedic medicine that have tons of empirical evidence behind them. And even more so, there's a lot of parts of Ayurvedic medicine that we just haven't really empirically tested. We just haven't done it. And so, the reality is, like, we just don't know if it's efficacious, and we should probably test
Okay,
those things rather than just assuming Ayurveda's
okay,
crackery and like
but
tossing it out.
okay, but my point is, okay, so we got parts of it that work, so we take it and we say this is medicine, right? I'm not saying Western medicine. You're the one that's talking about Western medicine, right? We say, right,
You
this
labeled it
works.
Western medicine, but yeah,
Wait, when who what?
I've been calling it allopathic medicine specifically, actually.
Hang on a second. First of all, allopathic and Western medicine. I mean, allopathic is often used in that kind of vein, but that's fine. I've not talked about Western medicine at all. My belief has nothing to do with Western medicine versus Eastern medicine. I think that the separation of Western and Eastern medicine is an issue because it suggests that there's some trait within these different types of medicine that makes it more valid or not valid. And this is often used by quacks, by pseudoscience type people, to push the idea that Western medicine is lacking something that Eastern medicine can give you. What I'm saying is you take the good stuff out, you call it medicine and it's universal. It's for everyone, okay? And then you don't need to have these sometimes completely unscientifically founded cultural practices under a certain label. You just have a form of medicine and that can be a global thing. I don't think you need to have like, oh, well, we've got to pay credence to like Ayurveda, in other aspects to this or give it some credit or something like that. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't agree with this idea that I'm, disrespecting the culture. But even if I was, I don't really personally care about that sort of thing. But
Do you feel like you're respecting the culture?
I mean, I would respect the issue I've got with this respecting the culture narrative is like, how far do we take this, right? Like if there was a cultural practice that existed and it was slaughtering newborn babies in order to improve the health of older people, right? But there was some other aspect of that framework that worked. Would we take that and go, okay, listen, this part works, but we're still going to pay respect to the broad aspect of that cultural practice, even though there's something which is totally insane that they're doing as part of it? Like, I don't think we would. So I don't see why we would do it with this either. You take the stuff that works, it becomes medicine. That's a global sort of perspective that you can use. And then anything that doesn't work can be maybe a cultural practice or, a religious practice, as long as no one gets harmed through doing it. But it's separated from what we can test and what we know works as medicine.
Okay. So you're not interested in respecting culture. You're kind of you're like I'm just right now. I'm summarizing, by the way. I'm not
Sure.
like
No, that's fine.
casting. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So if I'm understanding you, you're kind of saying you're not concerned about any culture at all. In fact, you're willing to disrespect a culture if basically empiricism fundamentally comes first in your mind, which you would call medicine, right? Like the backbone and modern medicine is empiricism, which I would agree with, right?
Well, no, hang on a second. I don't want to.
Is that what you're?
I don't want to
Okay,
overtake it too much, right? Because
no, I'm summarizing, so please clarify
Sure.
until it's clear that I'm understanding what you're saying.
So individual religious practice that causes no harm to anyone else, right? I've got no problem with that. What in any aspect, right? So whether it's Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, whatever religious practice. So, I think that if you're just individually practicing something, even something I don't truly understand, that has no risk and doesn't cause harm to other people, then that's fine. But I think that should be entangled from our analysis of medicine. So yeah, but obviously, no, I'm not going to like disrespect someone's culture on the basis of like a religious practice or something like that. But I'm not concerned about the idea of disrespecting a medical practice that isn't confirmed to work on the basis that it comes from India or comes from some other country. And I wouldn't apply that standard to any medical practice, regardless of where it comes from in the world, even if it's a white country.
Do you think there's value in giving credit to the inventors, though, of certain major practices?
Yeah, of course, yeah. If someone's invented a medical practice, the person that invented it should be credited for that, of course. No problem with that whatsoever. But I don't think my position prevents that from happening.
Yeah, but some of the Ayurvedic medicines were invented within Ayurveda, and they are empirically sound. And we should probably give credit to those things.
We'll give person to the credit the person that created it. Then we don't have this problem over here. I don't think it's like if someone came up with a cure for
But if
cancer.
the person who made it was an Ayurvedic doctor, are we willing to call them an Ayurvedic doctor in the credit that we're giving them?
Well, I just don't see why that would be necessary. Like, if they've created a practice that is medically sound and can be scientifically proven to work, just call them a doctor like you would anyone else. I don't know. I don't understand how how the process would work.
Because the Ayurvedic doctor probably cares about the fact that they're an Ayurvedic doctor. Like
Well,
if you're going to give them credit, you have to give credit
Okay.
to the way that they want to be. It's the same thing with like, if you're going to give credit to somebody, you want to give credit in the way that's actually valid to that person or maybe that
Right.
culture, whatever it is, right? And so if you're being like, well, we're just going to call you like an MD, and they're like, well, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm an Ayurvedic doctor. Like, I don't want credit for being a medical doctor. That's not what I am.
Okay, if someone came up with a cure for cancer tomorrow and they insisted on being referred to as, like, say, a Christian doctor, as an example, do you think we should, like, be permissive of that?
I don't really understand how that, I guess maybe I'm missing how you're connecting that to here.
Well, I mean, okay, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, no? Like, you're saying that if there's some sort of cultural practice that they're engaged in, we should be recognizing of that if they're from India, and we should recognize they're an Ayurvedic doctor or a Hindu doctor, say. Presumably, you'd
What's
apply
a
the same logic.
discipline? It's the discipline, right? Ayurvedic is, yeah, it's cultural, but it's a cultural discipline of medicine.
Okay.
And if the discipline makes a practice that has empirical merit, we should probably give a little bit of credit to it. We don't have to give all the credit, right?
Okay.
The only credit you can give homeopathy is that they invented the term allopathic medicine, which meant evidence-based. But I can give that to them. Yeah, they invented the term that we use now. Nothing else in homeopathy is great. I'm not for it at all. It's biologically, theoretically impossible, and there's no evidence for it at all.
Okay.
Seems to be a con.
Okay, but if there was something in homeopathy that was scientifically proven to work, would you be willing to credit the doctor as a homeopathic doctor then?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Because
if the practice, if the discipline leads to empirical merit, we should probably give it a little bit of credit. Something went on with Ayurvedic doctors where they came up with a lot of woo-woo weird shit. Fair enough. But they also came up with some stuff that's very borne out empirically, even though they oftentimes are not using the empirical method at all. That's interesting. We should probably look at that, and we should probably give some credit to the philosophy of science that they're engaging in, because they came up with, and it could be that the only reason they came up with it is they just lucked out. But scientifically, we need to just look at it. That's good science, is just looking and saying if an entire discipline has come up with not one, but at least three that I can think of, and there's probably more. Massage, you could argue, comes from it, right? We should probably look at the discipline's philosophy. There might be something there that we can benefit from, which is more so my view of Ayurveda, as I broadly don't care. It's not a thing I'm not culturally tied to it, but it might bring in a philosophy of science into particularly mental health that might be like the clutch that improves the science over time, overall.
I guess my issue is that if that by some crazy chance there was some aspect of homeopathy that turned out to actually work, by saying, oh, hey, we got this homeopathic doctor and they found this treatment, first of all, I don't think it's anything to do with homeopathy that it's worked, just like I don't think it's anything to do with the concept of Ayurveda.
We don't know that. We don't know that. We have to test it. We just have to test it. And it's not crazy. If it works, every time, if it works in randomized control trials, if a meta-analysis proves it works, there's something there. We might not theoretically be able to understand what it is. That's kind of where acupuncture's at. It doesn't work for most things. It's not a panacea for all, but it's decently effective for chronic pain. There's lots of studies that show this. That's interesting. We don't know why it works, but we certainly need to look into it.
Okay.
And
by the way, have you got some of these studies just so I can have a little look through? I'm
not
an expert by any means, but
lots of studies. What studies specifically are you wanting? Like which, do you want like acupuncture or what are you thinking? I'll just send them to you. I have a lot of studies that I've prepped, so okay. I don't want to just send you
it's obviously
like 20 articles. I want to send you specific articles that you want. Yeah.
It can be a bit tricky to obviously, go over them on stream. But what I tend to do is
You
if
can
you
look at them
send,
after and
yeah,
then
yeah,
come
and
back
then
at me, right? Like
yeah,
that's totally fine with me. I wouldn't
I
expect you
think
to
that
go
would
on
probably
those.
be the best thing to look at, and then I can sort of look into it and
Sure.
you know, get
So do you
into
want
more details with it.
evidence on acupuncture and like yoga,
So
meditation, that sort of
my
stuff that I'm
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about,
because
or which?
so just an example off the top of my head, right? My understanding with acupuncture is there's like some limited signs that it is somewhat beneficial for pain relief,
Yeah,
but
chronic
it's
pain specifically.
yeah, yeah, but it's not something that is like acupuncture. I tend to look at I was looking at the NHS about this. Acupuncture is something that is very seldom sort of prescribed or used, because there
Depends,
isn't.
I think, on what you're going for. Like, I've seen a ton of physiotherapists that, to be honest, I don't like acupuncture, actually. I hate it. It's never worked for me. I don't like it. I've seen a ton of physiotherapists that are really, really well trained. That kind of, because here's the thing, like, once we have a bit of evidence for things, when it comes to clinical practice, there's kind of this like throw shit at it till it sticks if we can't treat it with the basic things that we think empirically should treat it, right? That's kind of how medicine works. So I think acupuncture kind of gets lumped into the like, well, there's some evidence for it. I'm not going to tell you it's going to be a panacea. And a good doctor would say, it's not going to fix everything. I'm not going to fix your Crohn's disease with acupuncture, right? That would be a ridiculous, absurd claim to make. And some acupuncturists make it. And those people are engaging in pseudoscientific proliferation, right? Throw the book at them. But if somebody's got chronic pain, you've tried physio, you've tried everything, and they don't really want to get on pain medication for really valid reasons, because being on long-term pain medication, the implications with addiction are very serious. And so they're like, well, before I go on pain medication, maybe I'll try acupuncture. And we'll just try it, because there's some evidence that it seems to work with chronic pain. Maybe it'll fix their problem, and that's great.
Yeah, like I say, I know that for some conditions it has like limited use even in like the NHS. So I'm not saying that I don't see acupuncture, because I think what the problem I've got here is you're comparing acupuncture, right, which does admittedly have some very limited potential for like chronic pain, for example, and might well be used in certain limited circumstances, but you're kind of comparing that to to Ayurveda, and having
No,
looked at
I'm
it.
not comparing it to
No. What I
Ayurveda,
mean, but you're
right?
using it as an example of like
Am I
you're
using
saying
it?
you're no, because what you're doing is you're going, oh well, and you've talked about Ayurveda, and then you bring it over to acupuncture, and I haven't even mentioned or spoken about acupuncture, and I
I
would.
talked about Ayurvedic treatment specifically. I talked about meditation, yoga,
Well,
and
why are you talking
ashwagandha.
about
And then I
acupuncture?
compared it to acupuncture, because acupuncture also
Right.
comes from an Eastern medicine tradition that it sounded woo woo and weird. It came from more Asian countries, right? And it just seems to have some evidence for it. And the weird thing about acupuncture is, to be honest, at a theoretical, like speculation level, we have no fucking clue why. But there's some evidence for it, which is interesting. It means scientifically we're missing something, and acupuncture could help us learn a ton
So,
about something. There's
okay.
something going
So,
on there.
sorry. Yeah, sure.
That's why we're having this
Okay.
evidence.
But the point that I'm making here is there is nowhere like near the same level of evidence for Ayurvedic treatments as there are for acupuncture. So I just don't want to talk about acupuncture. Like I've not really mentioned acupuncture that much in my coverage, because I know that in some limited cases it is even prescribed on, like, say, the NHS. So I'd sort of put that to one side and say Ayurveda is the stuff that I've kind of done coverage on, and that's the stuff where I genuinely don't think there's any. I think there's maybe, I can't remember. There's one study I think off the top of my head that had limited findings that maybe showed some evidence, but more research was required. But other than that, it's not in any way kind of backed to the same level of something like acupuncture, which is in itself limited.
Sure. So let's maybe talk about the Ayurvedic practice of meditation then instead. I would say meditation has probably more evidence behind it than acupuncture, right? Like I said, there's no reason why acupuncture makes sense for us to work. There's just some evidence for it, which is weird, right? Meditation, theoretical speculation, also understands why it can work. And I mean, I can send you stuff, but to be honest, you just have to Google Scholar meta-analysis meditation, and you're going to find tons of it. And you might be like, well, meditation isn't an Ayurvedic practice, but it is, because there are meditations that have distinctly come out of Ayurveda, and a lot of there's a bunch of modalities of treatment that really value meditation and mindfulness. ACT therapy is the main one that comes to mind, acceptance and commitment therapy. They usually give credit to their homage of coming from more Eastern, particularly Indian, Buddhist, Hindu traditions of meditation, and they've incorporated these meditations into these therapeutic practices. It's not the only thing that they do in these therapies. But yeah, I found 3 meta-analysis on meditation
Okay.
just by putting in a Google Scholar. So I can send them to you, but like to be honest, like
So again, though, with
you can probably just find
meditation,
it on your own too.
we can take meditation and we can go right. Here's the aspects of meditation that we know work. We can still call it meditation. We can even credit the history of where it's come from. It's got a history of Eastern tradition, which I would argue that often the claims about what meditation can do and the actual mechanism that it has is overstated by some of these places. But even so, I think we can say it's got a history in Hinduism or whatever. We've looked at it. These are the aspects that work. We'll still call it meditation, which is kind of our name for it anyway, I guess. But we can implement that and we can call it meditation. Meditation is beneficial for this, and we can completely we can disregard then everything else. We don't have to pay too much credence to it. We can just have meditation as a practice and use it as part of a toolkit for psychological or psychiatric assistance for someone.
Sure, and I'm all for including it as a toolkit, but what I want to say is, to be honest, meditation is an Ayurvedic practice, which means that there is the discipline of Ayurveda, and actually I just looked it up, acupuncture is also an Ayurvedic practice as well, which means this discipline of medicine, while it's come up with a lot of pseudoscience, has also come up with a lot of empirically sound treatments, like meditation, acupuncture, yoga, there's some benefits for ashwagandha as well.
But again, yoga again is something where the benefits of it are massively overstated by the central overview of practice that it comes from. Like, yes, there's some benefits from the physical way in which yoga works on your body, but my concern is if you go too heavy on it and you give too much credence to the place it's come from, you end up pushing people down a path where they start to believe some of the claims that that's making. Whereas what you can do is take what works from it and implement that as part of a normal healthcare regime. And you don't even need to involve the, historic traditional practices or anything like that. You can literally just have the aspects of it that works as part of a treatment. You can call it yoga. I don't know. I don't see a problem with doing it that way.
So, sure. Can I maybe try this from maybe a different, like kind of back us up and kind of re-enter this from a different side where maybe we'll see more eye to eye?
Okay, go on.
So, would you say that we are in a mental health crisis in at least like most of the areas where we could study mental health really consistently? So, more like first world countries, Western hemispheric countries, and Australia.
Yeah, I'd probably say that's accurate. Yeah.
Okay. Why do you think we have such a massive mental health crisis right now?
I think there's like a number of things. I think our lifestyles contribute massively to stress, which contributes to mental health issues. I think that even in the UK, where we've got healthcare provided by the state, there's massive deficiencies in the way that's provided, and local authorities have a lot of trouble, even in the NHS, getting people the help that they need. There's long waiting lists. So oftentimes, obviously, like antidepressants, for example, are not meant to be a long-term treatment. They're meant to be like normally it's like a year or maybe 2 years that someone is on antidepressants to take the edge off the more serious
what does Ayurveda have to do with meditation?
the more serious, sorry, Scott, I don't know, the more serious symptoms, and then people are normally able to seek out or are told how to seek out like therapy that helps them manage their symptoms of something like CBT long term. But the problem is with the waiting lists the way they are, people can often end up on medication for like a long time, and they don't end up getting the assistance from therapy. So even if they end up coming off the antidepressants, they can end up relapsing because they haven't actually dealt with the core fundamental issues at the heart of their psyche. I don't know. That's kind of how I would say it.
Okay. So there's a growing concern within the psychological field as a whole that the medical model of psychology is dominantly responsible for the plateau in efficacy we're seeing in our pharmacological and therapeutic treatments. I can send you another article. It's a really, really strong article that kind of goes through the whole history of the medicalization of mental health, the benefits that have been gleaned from the medicalization of it, and then the serious drawbacks that have also been made. And to be honest, fundamentally, some somewhat anti-scientific approaches that we've had by trying to force a medical lens on mental health.
What do you mean? What do you mean by a medical lens on mental health? What do you mean by that?
So, a medical lens on mental health would be defined in this way. It would say that the biomedical model of a mental disorder argues that mental disorders are brain diseases caused by neurotransmitter dysregulation, genetic anomalies, defects in the brain structure, and in functioning. Those fundamentally seem a medical view. We don't know where and how, and there's probably something, but we're trying to advance neuroscience to find out what fundamentally those biomarkers would be of a mental health condition. That would be a medical view of mental health, which is dominantly what we practice from. That's why the DSM is designed in the way it is. The DSM is overseen by medical doctors, actually. We really do have a biomedical model of mental health. At least I won't speak for Europe. It seems to be the case in most European countries, but for sure in Canada and United States, unquestionably, we have a medical model of mental health. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. So this is basically the kind of mental health is as an outcome of like defects in the brain or something like that. Is how it's put simply, right?
Yeah. There's
Okay.
got to be some. It's happening in an organ, so there must be some sort of like organ dysfunction going on that's causing the issue, more or less.
Sure.
The issue is that scientists have not identified biological causes or even a reliable biomarker for almost all mental disorders.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So, what's interesting to me is that Ayurveda, most of the things that seem to have evidence behind it are particularly evidence for mental health related conditions. Chronic pain is both considered a medical condition and a mental health condition because of mostly the weirdness of we don't fucking know what chronic pain is. There's a couple of like theories that seems to be maybe connected to glial cells, but it doesn't capture a lot of other people with chronic pain as well. Oh shoot, I literally just lost my train of thought. Where was I going with this? The medical model, glial cells, chronic pain. Okay, so the main methods that I think are empirically sound that Ayurvedic discipline has brought up has been meditation, yoga, and ashwagandha, all of which seem to have, particularly the first two, and acupuncture seem to have distinctive benefits for mental health conditions, which I find very interesting. Because if we're calling this discipline didn't engage in empirical science. They didn't come to their findings by using strict empiricism. They came to it through they seem to have a much more holistic approach of like finding patterns within systems, is broadly my understanding of the Ayurvedic like philosophical principles. The fact that this discipline has come up with multiple methods of treating mental health that have been, particularly meditation, instrumental in moving the entire mental health field forward in treating mental health is very interesting to me, and it needs to be analyzed. And I'm not comfortable calling all of Ayurveda just quackery when the discipline itself has come up with very solid methods of treating certain mental health conditions.
But it hasn't come up with that because of any standards within Ayurveda itself. If anything, it would be chance that some of because
maybe
Indian medicine, if you go back and look at the start of it, like they talk about how the gods themselves came down and told the first practitioners how to engage in medicine. Like, this isn't that they've got a sort of specific methodology that they use that gives good results or something like that. It's more so through chance, like lots of history of medicine. Like there's lots of history of medicine where through chance we found that something works, and then we kind of go with that and we develop it. And the adoption of the scientific method and empiricism has enabled us to put rigorous testing on these things in order to confirm that it works. So again,
but the
I just don't see
goes behind to show why we chanced. We figure out the etiology of why these chances worked, and there seems to be something going on that a discipline is consistently finding certain things that are also empirically sound. We should probably, I'm not even saying we should wholesale all become Ayurvedic doctors and let's all drink juju berries and be happy and kumbaya together. Like, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying it's anti-scientific to just call all of Ayurveda just quackery and pseudoscience when the discipline itself has come up with certain treatments that are empirically sound, like meditation, like acupuncture.
Okay, so are we saying that, like, basically in places like in America and England, etc., wherever, there's like a mental health crisis, but in India it's better? Is that right?
That's not at all what I'm saying. right? Because
Right.
an issue
Well,
that India has is that they have mass amounts of population. They're not a first world country, and you could argue that to some extent mental health issues seem to arise more when you have a lot of your foundational needs met. It's hard to stress about whether or not like somebody hurt your feelings if you're struggling to like just basically survive. There seems to be some evidence for that. So it's not a good one-to-one comparison between like mental health in the Western Hemisphere and like a second or third world country. It just feels like a really disingenuous analogy.
okay.
So to say disingenuous,
So
an inaccurate
again,
analogy.
yeah. Again, I guess the question I've got is like, again, I would just say, okay, so you're saying there's some stuff in Ayurveda which might work. Great. Let's rigorously test it. See what works, and then we can implement that. I just don't understand why you feel this need to credit Ayurveda or go back to Ayurveda or say, oh, there's some stuff in Ayurveda that might work. Fine, let's have a look at it and see if it does.
We know that some does work. There's things in Ayurvedic medicine that work, which means the philosophy of the scientific discipline itself might have some merit to it. And to be honest, we've been using a dominantly medical lens of research when we look at mental health, and it seems like we've stagnated and plateaued for a while. What if the scientific principles that led Ayurvedic doctors to chance upon these treatments, what if there are certain principles we can analyze, incorporate into our empirical method that would vastly improve, alleviate suffering, because we find major breakthroughs in mental health treatment because we need it. We desperately need it.
So what are these practices in Ayurveda that are being used that you think are basically superior to what we're doing when it comes to mental health and we should consider? Like what if we're using the scientific method, what are they using that we need to be is it the dosha, is it the pitta, like what is it you think we should use?
Yeah, the doshas, I looked a fair bit into it to try to see if there's anything. So what I found when I looked into the evidence for doshas is pretty weak. Most of the research on anything like to me, I kind of akin doshas broadly to just like Myers-Briggs personality psych, which isn't like the most empirically strong form of personality psych. It can be benefit for clinicians to use because it can help people like introspect about themselves, which is really valuable for therapeutic benefits. When I tried to look at like doshas, like genetically mapping on to people's genome and stuff, to be honest, the evidence was pretty weak. I wouldn't say that I'm broadly for that, like because like I said, I'm not here to like set out everything.
But that's the framework of Ayurveda. That's what they use. So
right.
What else
which
is there?
Interesting, right? Which is interesting. So
well, no, it's a load of bullshit.
No, it's not bullshit because meditation works.
Okay, but meditation would be utilized in line with figuring out what someone's dosha is.
And if it works and it's empirically sound, we need to look at that. So what I was going to say about doshas is I think that there needs to be, so when you look at so there's a ton of articles on doshas, but if you look at the journals, they're dominantly from journals that are going to have vested interest in proving Ayurvedic medicine. It's Journal of Ayurvedic Medicine, Ancient Science of Life, which is like basically I just
don't. Sorry, I don't want you to go off. Sorry, you're just kind of going off and down the.
No, can I finish?
The dusty
actually,
road.
What I'm saying, because no.
Okay,
I'm going to bring it to an important point. If you don't mind.
If you can bring it to the important point, that's fine. Bring it to the important point, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so the important point of this is that it seems like most of the research that's been done on dosha has been done by parties that have vested interest, which is not great research, particularly if they're only publishing in journals that do it. The problem is that we don't publish non-findings. So when it comes to dosha, if there has been like less biased research being done, if it's not being published, then we can't know whether they're true or not, right? It's like, what if this is a form of personality psych? That does have a fair bit of merit. Like, what if? We just need to test it. And it just, to me, I would say with doshas, Dr. K, it seems like, is stepping back and doing actual research on this stuff, which is the best practice that he can do. He should be empirically testing these things if he's peddling them so strongly. If there's evidence that comes from non-biased things, that there is some validity, specifically if doshas can be predictive and prescriptive for individuals, that would be really interesting and could be really, really helpful to the mental health field. I don't think that there will be, but it's possible. And I'm not willing to just say doshas are silly, stupid, dumb, because it's just like there isn't honestly evidence strongly against it. Like I couldn't find an article saying doshas, we've tested them, are absolute hogwash. I've mostly just found
wait.
research.
Sorry, listen, I'm going to have to cut in here because you're fucking going off at a million miles an hour with complete bullshit, okay?
No, I'm not doing that at all.
No, you are, because the thing is, right?
No.
So you're talking about the doshas, right? Has there been evidence proving the four humours is completely bunk?
I'm not talking about the four humours. We're talking about
I know
doshas.
what we're talking about. Okay.
Okay. Well, if you're going to accuse me of going off on like hogwash, like I don't know, it just feels like it doesn't feel like good engagement.
Okay.
And I'm being a really good faith actor with
There's
you.
a reason I'm asking, and I'll explain. Okay. So
Sure.
It's difficult to prove a negative, and when you're making a positive claim, the onus is on the person making the positive claim to prove that it works. The reason I mentioned the four humours is I would not point to the lack of evidence showing that the four humours don't work as strong evidence to argue in any way for it, right? I would say if you want to prove the four humours work, you need to argue and make a strong case for it and prove it through rigorous scientific method. And I'd make the same point about dosha. If you want to prove to me that dosha works, you need to take the steps to scientifically prove it. You've admitted that hasn't happened yet.
I haven't admitted that. I said there is evidence for it. The problem is that I feel like it's biased evidence, and I would want further research to confirm it.
Fine.
If I look up doshas, I can find 10 articles proving that doshas are valid. That's not the problem. My issue is I would argue it's weak evidence. So if they want to convince me on doshas, I need more. What you're saying is there's no evidence for doshas. And I'm like, that's not actually true, because even if it's a vested interest journal, you still scientifically can't just say that's garbage research. They just made it up, right? You have to trust the empirical process. So if it is the case that they've made up all of these like hundreds of articles on doshas that are vested interest, we should research that. That's why I'm saying it has weak quality evidence.
Okay, well then research it and we'll prove it, and then we'll have
Dr. K is. Dr. K is.
But he was making claims, right, on stream, saying that it's scientifically backed when it wasn't at all. He's making it up. It's not scientifically backed. At best, you can say there's some studies which have got some concerns about the vested interest or about the quality of the studies or something like that, that maybe says more research is needed. But he's going on saying it's scientifically backed, right? That's wrong.
How? If you have some clinical experience with it, that is the beginning process of empiricism. It doesn't mean that it's proven fact, but case studies aren't nothing. It's how you begin thesis generation.
What, case study on an individual patient? Like that's
well,
never
if you have a bunch
reasonable.
of doctors giving clinical experience, their doshic prescriptions are helpful, we should probably research that to see if it's true.
Right. Okay, but then we're not going to do anything further with it, in my mind, until we've researched it and confirmed it's true.
But if there's clinical experience, if there's even one case study, even if there's weak evidence for doshas, technically it's empirically backed.
No, I don't agree with this case. I don't agree with this case study thing at all. I don't think one.
Well,
case
I'm not
study...
using case studies. I can just show you the image I have of multiple peer review articles. Because what he talks about, so when you're referring to Dr. K, he's talking about basically more or less his experience of, not his experience. He's had, I think he was talking about, he had a bunch of Ayurvedic practitioners in India that predicted how COVID would influence those people, right?
Right, okay.
Okay, so that's why I'm talking about individual case studies, because in that case, that would be clinical experience. And if they documented it, that would then be labeled as a case study if it got peer reviewed and published. That's what I'm talking about.
But case studies are considered to be the most useless part of like medical. Like,
okay, wait.
You would never use a case study.
Can you walk me through? You need to prove to me. Can you walk me through the steps of hypothesis generation? Do you know them?
Well, no, I don't know the steps of hypothesis generation.
Then what? You don't?
No.
You need to know that if you're levying these critiques.
Why are you being so condescending?
You've been condescending to me almost this whole conversation. To be honest.
I haven't been condescending to you at all. You've insinuated that I'm fucking racist earlier, which I let slide.
No, I didn't.
Didn't make a big deal out of it.
I didn't insinuate.
You absolutely
asked me specifically about it, and I clearly said I don't think you're racist. No, I'm not acting like anything. I'm not acting in any way.
Remind me, sorry, what are your qualifications again?
What does that matter? Did I ask you for any of your qualifications?
No, I'd just like
I
to
could
know,
give
because
them
if
to
you want to take the expertise and act all pretentious with me, you can tell me what your qualifications are.
Okay, sure. Why don't I tell you the process of hypothesis generation?
No.
Since apparently you didn't know
No.
it, and then we can be on the same page.
Tell me
about
what. No.
something.
I'm not interested in that. Tell me what your qualifications are.
I'm not going down that road with you because it feels like bad faith argument. I can.
Well, no, I'm just
everyone knows
asking.
what my qualifications are in my channel. You're
you
welcome
wanna,
to ask
You want to
me
be
them.
super pretentious with me?
This isn't
Let's
good
go.
faith argument. This isn't good faith. I'm not being pretentious with you. I'm saying if you
why-
don't
listen,
know that,
if you-
let me
listen.
explain to you why it's important that you need to
No, you've
understand
done enough
hypothesis
explaining.
generation.
You've done enough
No, if you
explaining.
don't understand
You've done
hypothesis
enough
generation, then you're
explaining.
fundamentally misunderstanding the arguments that I'm making. The
You've done enough
arguments I'm making
explaining. I
are
wanna hear
coming
about these
from a scientific
credentials.
lens of. The arguments I am making is coming from a scientific lens of what hypothesis generation actually is.
Okay, you want to
That's why
lecture
it
me some
matters that
more?
the
Of course,
discipline has
go
been
on.
correct.
Off you go. Go on.
What do you mean?
Go on, off you go. Well, you're being very patronising to me. Listen,
No, I'm speaking over you
I
because
came
you
from a
basically
working
told
class
you-
family, okay? I don't have like this, namby-pamby fucking education, right? I'm not an expert on anything, and I openly admit that. And you're being patronising, and that's fine.
Which is fine. The reason I'm not giving you my credentials is I don't think you need credentials to engage in good arguments because you can just look shit up. What I'm saying is that the reason it seems that you're fundamentally misunderstanding my arguments is because you don't know the process of hypothesis generation, which you can just Google. It's fine that you haven't. I'm not trying to say you're a big stupid dum-dum. What I'm saying
Well, no, you went,
that
what? What?
this-
You don't know? That is very patronising. And listen, whatever, if you want to
fair. I
patronise
was
me, that's fine.
patronising at that
But if
point,
you
'cause
want to
that's
be
pretty
patronising to me, I want to know what your credentials are to give you the position to patronise me.
To be honest, I would say no one has credentials to patronize anyone. So fair
Well,
enough.
don't
I was
do it
being
then.
mildly patronizing.
Continue.
But to be honest, you've also been patronizing of me. So if at least condescending.
Okay, continue.
Okay. Do you want me to walk through?
Yes, please.
My argument
I'm ready to
around-
be educated. Go on.
Okay. 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 So this is it's labeled a functional approach to theory development. Okay.
Okay.
So what typically happens in theory development is broadly, it seems to be the case. So you can get engaged in basically like free open science where you just like theorize random bullshit and test it. But that doesn't usually seem to be the case. We usually do applied science, which is usually where we get some clinical experience. We observe some things in the world that we think are probably patterned together. And then we design a controlled empirical test with numbers and math to prove whether or not that pattern that we think is happening is actually happening. Okay. So typically what happens, particularly in science and particularly medical science, is there will be a clinical experience of some correlation between two things. Interesting. It seems to be the case, like with vaccines, when a kid is exposed to like a virus when they're healthy, they're resistant to those viruses later. Is that actually happening or not, right? And then we engage in some theory testing. So we create a hypothesis. The hypothesis is if you expose a child to a virus super early in their life, sorry, there's a cheer going on.
Sorry, are you reading this just to check?
No, I'm talking it out. I have like my notes pulled up just to reference to make sure that I'm not misspeaking, but I'm not reading it.
Okay.
Yep. So what they'll basically do is they will notice this clinical pattern and then they're going to design a test to see if it's true, right? And the gold standard in medicine would be an RCT, a randomized control trial. So that means they're going to give some kids this vaccine, they're going to give some kids a placebo, and they're going to see if the vaccinated kids are more resistant to the disease than the placebo kids. Turns out, yes, these vaccinated kids are more resistant. And then we do some math magic, and we're like, yeah, not only is it that they're more resistant, but they're statistically more significant, which means the pattern seems to be true. The hypothesis is probably valid. And then we do more studies and we replicate it and we replicate it. And then we do a meta-analysis and we put all of these studies together to see at a broad societal level, are we still seeing this trend? And with vaccines, I'm sure you'd agree, we see, yeah, there's a broad trend that these seem to be beneficial, right? What I'm saying is that hypothesis generation needs to come from observed experience. If we keep observing that these two things are related, we need to test it. It seems to be the case that Ayurvedic doctors have observed certain patterns of treatment that have validity, and then when we test them, they work out. Sometimes they don't, and we shouldn't use those practices at all. But some of them do, and they've offered things to the medicine field that didn't really exist before, because meditation was kind of viewed as like stupid woo-woo religious shit before it started getting more tested.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is there'll be like a clinical observation that occurs, say, in someone, and maybe we'll see a few more of those. And then from there, will engage in like a study or something like that to find out if there's any merit to it. And we kind of go from there. That's basically what you're saying, right?
Yep.
Right. So the point I would make to you is that in itself, a case study can only be used to justify or point towards doing a broader study that's going to prove like the thesis of what's being suggested in this case study, right?
I believe case studies are considered like quasi-experimental, yeah.
Sure, but you wouldn't reference a case study. Like it would be considered poor form to reference a case study as evidence of like a medicine or treatment working, right?
I wouldn't say it would be. It would be very low. It would be considered weak evidence, like very weak evidence.
Yeah, poor form. What I mean is like, you know, as a medical practice, like that wouldn't be considered the done thing, right? Like people would look at that if you're saying, right, I think we should do this treatment as a result of this case study. People are going to go, no, that seems a bit cringe. I don't know about that. It's only one case study. But if someone came along and said, actually, I think we should do this treatment and it's backed up by this study here, just to keep it simple, and it's actually a proper study and it's a clinical trial or whatever, that would be much more credible with which to go forward with the treatment on that basis, right?
Yeah, as soon as we start increasing the qualitative measures, they do increase in basically the weight of that evidence. But I wouldn't say a case study is zero evidence, because there is a bit of methodology that goes into case studies. That's why they're published as empirical research. They're just the weakest form of evidence.
But that is then used to fuel evidence which is much stronger down the line, right?
Ideally, yeah, that would be the ideal scientific process. Like, oh, that's fucking weird. We have 4 case studies of this happening. We should probably make a qualitative study of it now.
Right, okay. Because my understanding of case studies is that it's actually like it's more of an observation of something rather than it being like an experiment, right?
So that's not always true, especially not in modern science. I would say most case studies have a little bit more control. Depending on the case study of like what it is, it's going to vary. So sometimes case studies might be behavioral in nature. So they'll do like an inborn control with the case study where they'll give the treatment and then take away the treatment and then give the treatment and take away. And they'll repeat that pattern a couple of times to give some evidence of like, yeah, this seems to be trending. So that might be one way that we kind of build in a very light control, which is why I'm saying it's not as empirically sound as an RCT, right? Which has lots of qualitative and stuff. But it's usually not just like, oh, I noticed a thing and here's my client's experience. Usually we try to do a little bit of some level of testing. We can't do true controls because usually case studies are select on that one individual. So there isn't a true control of another individual to test against.
Right, okay. Because I guess like what I'm going to get at then is what's the point you're trying to make with this whole tangent that we're talking about now? Or what is it you're trying to say?
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is if we have a case study of an Ayurvedic or if we have a clinical experience, right? We have a couple of Ayurvedic doctors who have made a couple of claims about predictive power of doshas. Clinical experience is the first step oftentimes in hypothesis generation. Then we generate a hypothesis. There are case studies that I can find of this, but like we said, they're weak. And I'm also going to add on top of that, they might be biased as well. They're probably most likely biased as well, right? So I would say really weak evidence. We just need to keep testing it. My argument is that to call all of Ayurveda and all of its practice just garbage pseudoscience feels scientifically disingenuous. It's not what the scientific method does.
Okay, so tell me then, what hypotheses have we gotten off of Ayurveda then? Like, how far have we got through this process with Ayurveda?
Well, like I said, we've got acupuncture that seems to be testing out pretty well. Meditation and mindfulness is like...
Wait. Medication and mindfulness, acupuncture...
Meditation.
Yeah, meditation.
Not medication.
No, sure. I said meditation. So meditation and mindfulness. I mean, mindfulness is what kind of has been is referred to within medicine as practices from meditation that somewhat work, right? Or have some evidence of working. Like meditation
I
is
would say
separate
there's
from that.
robust evidence for meditation. It's not a panacea, but there's robust evidence for chronic pain and like improving, right? Mindfulness
when
meditation
we
for
talk
chronic
about it in the
pain, anxiety,
right,
depression, all sorts of mental OCD. It's been really, really impressive with
sure.
OCD, which you wouldn't expect.
My issue is the framework with which Ayurveda is based on is the concept of dosha. Now, acupuncture, meditation, mindfulness, whatever you want to say, is separate to all of that and can be implemented and dealt with separately to the central concept of Ayurveda, which is this concept of dosha. So what, like, because you mentioned that there's some practice or some sort of framework with which Ayurveda has maybe come to some conclusions. What are they outside of like using dosha to establish what these are?
I said that it might come to some conclusions, not that it has with doshas. I said the evidence really isn't there either way. There just needs to be more research on it. Doshas to me broadly seem like personality psych. Maybe it's stronger than Myers-Briggs. I don't believe that it'll ever become as strong as like a Big Five personality psych test. Like there's a lot of evidence for Big Five. There's not much evidence for Myers-Briggs. It might compete or be like I would guess it would be about the Myers-Briggs. I could be wrong though. Like we just have to test it. The body stuff I feel much more dubious towards. I would really need to see some pretty insane evidence. But the reality is like if it works out, we might have a whole new framework from which to go about treating and making recommendations for clients with maybe mental health, for example. But we just have to test it.
Okay. So what you're saying is there might be some stuff in Ayurveda that works, so we should pay respect to it while scientists figure out if it does or not.
We should give some weight to the Ayurvedic philosophy of science because it seems to have come across good empirical treatments often enough that we should probably try to figure out because why I'm saying this, like we've talked about.
I don't know. There's a lot of Ayurvedic practices which are like not very good at all. So
that's fair. I guess maybe I should focus on mental health wise. It seems like they've come up with some pretty solid stuff. I'm sure there's lots of hogwash in it too.
Okay, but did Ayurveda come up with the concept of meditation? I thought that was more rooted in like Hinduism.
Yeah, but Ayurveda and Hinduism seem to be like kind of interchanged. Like Ayurvedic medical practice seems to also be dominantly a religious practice.
Okay, no, I don't know if that's correct because Ayurveda is specifically talking about dosha and the analysis of one's dosha to guide medical outcomes and medical treatment. So I don't know if that's linked to Hinduism.
It could be, or
I mean, listen, it sounds like you're kind of blending Eastern philosophies in with each other. I don't know. I think that they're separate things personally.
So my experience with most like meditation and stuff like that is most like therapies give homage to Buddhist and Hindu traditions for mindfulness meditation. It seems to be the case that Ayurvedics strongly recommend mindfulness and meditation. Whether they stole it from the religious people or the religious people stole it from them, I suspect it was probably conjoint of there were religious Ayurvedic doctors who were motivated to prove that their religious practice was also good for health. That would be my suspicion of how that played out. But They seem to be right, at least about meditation for mental health. It doesn't fix your Crohn's, but it does seem to boost mental health a fair bit.
So I think the problem I've got, though, is I don't think that's true. I think that Ayurveda and Hinduism are not as linked as you say they are. And even if they both touch on a similar practice, that could just be as an outcome of them existing within similar cultures or the same culture, rather than them being intertwined in the way that you think they are. To me, my understanding of Ayurveda, having looked into it, is its central conceit is to do with this concept of dosha. But as an aside to this, like, do you apply the same thing to other things, like say chakras, for example? Would you take the same approach with chakras? We should be a bit more respectful towards the concept until we can scientifically prove it.
Well, it doesn't seem like I haven't seen much evidence for chakras at all. Mostly, I've actually seen evidence against chakras.
Well,
so I would say
you've probably
no.
seen the same amount of evidence for that as you have for like this concept of dosha, no?
Probably not, to be honest. Like in class, at least in psychology, we went through examples of pseudoscience, and chakras was one of the one we went through. And there was quite a number of articles my professor brought up that were quantitative studies on chakras and how they're basically like not predictive of anything. They don't seem to be borne out really strongly at all.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just looking it up. It seems like Ayurveda is a pretty broad subject. It's a story of Ayurveda is that a Hindu god came down and gave understanding of health and body and medicine.
Sure.
And like in a culture that's deeply religious, like in most cultures that are deeply religious, their medicine and their religion often overtwine because religion is like this prescription of how to like be a good person in the world, and medicine is how to be a healthy person, right? So it makes sense that these things culturally often get intertwined,
Did you just
which I
Google
actually
that?
think is a big weakness. Yeah.
Did you just? Okay, that's fine. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just think that I don't disagree with the concept of, hey, if there's a cultural practice that's being engaged in that potentially has some benefit, let's find out, what works, what doesn't, and let's take the stuff that works and implement it along a, standard sort of healthcare regime. We've done this with meditation. It's called mindfulness when it's implemented over here. And that takes some of the practices of meditation, the ones that have got some sort of backing or some sort of evidence that they have some benefit, and we implement that, and that seems to be working fine. And I think that, the separation of the pseudoscientific practices from the stuff that works and implementing the stuff that works in normal medicine tends to be the best way forward. This is how it's worked for like a long time now, and everything seems to be okay. If anything, I think that in India, the practice of Ayurveda and the fact it does have some level of government support is actually harmful, and there are even doctors within India that are trying to push back against it and are pushing for more, medically proven scientific medicine to help people over there. So it seems
Which
to
makes
be
sense because modern science utilizes the empirically backed thing. So I would say I'm not saying that Ayurveda is better and that it treats all conditions better than like modern sciences. That's not what I'm saying at all. I would say it's beyond borne out that modern science broadly treats things. And so I would say for India, where they've got this deep tradition where we've talked about, it seems like a lot of their more medical treatments, particularly like some of the drinks and stuff that they recommend, I haven't seen nearly as much evidence for those things. And so I think it totally makes sense at a political level to want to distance yourself empirically as much as possible from an Ayurvedic tradition in the country that's really, really attached to it. But that doesn't mean when we're being scientific and analyzing Ayurveda that we just say all of Ayurveda is hogwash and garbage, and we should just, anything that's valid, we'll just take it and claim it as science, and then we'll keep calling Ayurveda craziness because of the discipline. The discipline came to these ideas.
Okay, but my point is, you're acting like claiming it for medicine or science is making it like ours, like it's making it the West's or something. And I just don't see it that way. I think you can claim something for science and it's a global thing. It's something that affects all of us all around the world, regardless of what culture you're from. Obviously, we've got to account for difference with races when it comes to medicine. Obviously, that is an issue in that historically, medicine has treated sort of white people, so it tends to be, balanced towards white people. Sickle cell anemia is a great example of how the medical system has failed historically when it comes to treating conditions which specifically affect people of different, ethnicities or races or whatever. But I think that like. I just think that it seems a bit unnecessary to sort of separate it out. We're going to take it for ourselves. Well, no, we're taking it for everyone, because what we're doing then is we're saying, right, you've got this cultural practice. We've got this process, all of us around the world globally, not just the West, but there's a process, the scientific method, which we know has some benefit and works. We can use it to apply to that cultural practice. If it works, we can confirm it works, and then everyone can use it around the world, and we don't need to associate it with this kind of, cultural practice relative to that area. We can be respectful to the history of it, and I think that, it's fair enough to say, hey, this practice originally came out of, Ayurvedic practice. Through the application of a process, we figured out it works, and now we use it to treat X condition. I think that's acceptable. But other than that, I don't see why we need to pay credence to, Ayurveda, in itself, when there's nothing in Ayurveda itself which is to do with the legitimacy of the treatment, right? That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, that makes sense. So part of accumulating all of these things from everyone and kind of making it available to everyone is respecting the disciplines that created them. So that doesn't mean respecting all parts of it, but there's something that's going on with the Ayurvedic discipline of medicine that they have come up with some good stuff. It could just be chance, but I genuinely am empirically curious if we applied Ayurvedic lenses of understanding mental health a little bit more and then also tested it, if we might get some major leaps forward in the mental health field. As a mental health practitioner, I'm genuinely just curious. I just want to see the evidence for or against that. And if it's not helpful and it seems to not be bearing out, yeah, we can just like leave it behind. If we like want to make it for everyone, like you said, like we should respect the traditions. The problem is that like by saying all of Ayurveda is pseudoscience or Ayurvedic doctors are just pseudoscience, Dr. K peddles only pseudoscience, not only pseudoscience, he peddles pseudoscience, feels disingenuous to what Ayurvedic medicine is because it's such a huge discipline.
Okay, and it's a huge discipline, and out of that we can take something. I just think we're at an impasse because I just don't agree with this idea that you've got, that we have to pay any level of credence beyond saying, hey, this practice came out of Ayurveda, we found that it has scientific backing, so we can implement it as a standard healthcare regime for anyone because we know it works. It's got a history from Ayurvedic practice, but using this process we've been able to establish it works. We've done a study, we've proven that it works. Bish bash bosh, off you go. And then you've got none of this dosha nonsense, which hasn't got any meaningful scientific backing as it stands. You move away from some of the harmful practices of Ayurveda that are practiced. You're not then running the risk of people, getting into communities where this sort of stuff is peddled. I think that seems to be a perfectly fine system. It's what we use now. And yeah, if there are if there is stuff within Ayurveda which we can use, fine. But even the stuff you're mentioning, like meditation, like I say, we've already taken meditation and we've already looked at what works and we've implemented the mindfulness aspects of it in standard practice where applicable. So that seems to have been done and it's fine and we're cool with that and we've kind of moved on and we have it as part of a treatment regime now. If there's anything else that comes along, great, we'll do it with that as well. But I don't agree with this idea that by taking it, we're somehow taking it away from them and giving it to us and we're then taking it and I think it then becomes global and anyone can use it, as part of a standardized, tested treatment process.
Okay. So I guess, yeah, I'm hearing what you're saying. I feel like we actually probably broadly agree more than we disagree. We're kind of like getting caught up, it feels like, on like a couple of small points, which is basically for me, I'm saying we can take those things. You're even willing to give credit to the Ayurvedic discipline and the history where it comes from, which is valid. That's more or less all I'm asking as far as like giving credit. But what I also want to do is say there might be something about the way that they're looking at the world that might have scientific merit to something.
What is it? Okay, what is it in the way that they're looking at the world that you believe has scientific merit worth investigating?
So particularly with mental health, because that's more, to be honest, my biased interest. It seems to be the case, let me just pull up the article that I was looking at before again. It seems to be the case that we've somewhat stagnated. It seems like like when quantum physics hit physics, it like revitalized the study of physics and it was like a massive leap forward in the field.
Right. Sorry, I think I know what you're saying. So you're saying in the West, say, we have stagnated and we need a path forward, and you're suggesting we look at some of these alternative methods as a means to which to find the answers. Is that right?
Just test them. Yeah, just test them.
Okay, so what specifically in Ayurveda do you want to test?
The outlook of basically, so a lot of times with therapeutic treatments, what we do is we find a disorder, like a micro, and then we basically say, here's how to treat it for everyone. And we kind of give a blanket treatment to everyone. And it seems to work decently. It seems to have a pretty mixed effect. Some people works really well. Like we have that spread. Whereas Ayurveda seems to be interested in going like, are there types of people that we can actually prescribe different things to that are basically like based on their unique genomic composition or whatever. Some would say genomic, some would say more like spiritual. It seems like they're trying to lay doshas onto like
dosha
genome.
Stuff again. We're going back to the doshas then.
Yeah, right. It might actually be a helpful
right.
mindset.
So what specifically in regards to dosha should we look into further then? What do you think is there that we need to look into?
I think it's worth testing if so kind of like how personality psych separates people into like kind of large categories and clusters of how they broadly function, right? It'd be interesting to see, because dosha this doshitic thing claims that what they can do is they can do what personality psych does and categorize people into these types and these splits of like their identity, but they can also prescribe certain treatments to that individual that wouldn't be helpful, right? So if you've got like an anxious person who's I'm trying to remember the names, who's got kapha or something like that, it might be better to give them this treatment versus an anxious person who's got lots of vata. That to me, not the words or the dosha themselves, but the idea of saying, are there different like major types and categories? Is there a way to understand people at a more individual and more holistic sense that we can give better prescriptions? Because we kind of have like a one size fits all approach, it seems, to mental health, which is better than nothing.
Do you think that's true?
I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, like, what's
I
CBT?
disagree with that.
What's the premise of CBT?
I disagree.
Why do we recommend it for everything, basically?
Sure, but the CBT isn't the only thing that's recommended. I think there's other...
It's probably the most dominantly recommended, at least in Canada and America, maybe not in Europe.
Sure, okay. But isn't that because CBT has got backing as having some scientific merit in helping with this?
Oh, yeah. Tons of scientific backing.
So that's why it would be the most recommended one.
But it's also one size fits all, which was, I think, what you were taking issue with originally, was that I was kind of saying we approach mental health as a bit of a one size fits all, which I would say broadly is true. Obviously, individual practitioners try to individualize it, but our treatments and the way we research them is kind of one size fits all. So the premise of CBT is basically everyone has cognitions, everyone has behaviors and thoughts and feelings. So if we treat these things, it should probably broadly help everyone. And there's evidence that's borne out. The problem is that we'd like it to be higher. Meta-analysis of CBT on something like depression seems to have about like a 0.77 effect size, with probably a range on either side, but depending on the meta-analysis that you look at, right? So we're like, okay, it's decently effective. We'd like it to be higher, and we have to deal with people who fall through the cracks, because there are lots of people who fall through the cracks.
Well, okay, let's say there's people that fall through the cracks. That's fine. I can accept that there's going to be some stuff where even the approach to CBT isn't going to be relevant. I guess that like I don't have a problem with using whatever tools are necessary to help them, but I think we need to apply a rigorous standard to whatever tools we want to try and give them. We've maybe got some tools in our disposal already, but you're suggesting that we should maybe look at like what Ayurveda is doing. I mean, I don't think that India is particularly leading the way in the world in terms of mental health, so I'm not sure if there is anything based on that would be substantive from Ayurveda that's worth looking into. If you got something specific, that's fine. You said it wasn't about doshas, but now you are kind of talking about dosha. So
I'm rooting it in something Ayurvedic related, right? Like what I'm saying is the idea, because I think we're mostly agreeing here, to be honest, right? Because just to be clear, I'm not strongly saying doshas are obviously true and we should use doshas. I'm saying the philosophical and kind of empirical view that it's giving might be empirically valid, that we could test, and we could find a better method that isn't doshas. Maybe doshas will lead to the next thing that's way more empirically sound, but allows us to more individually tailor prescriptions to individuals that seem to work for them better based on their individual characteristics.
Right. Okay. And where are you getting this from? That this dosha is somehow resulting in like better outcomes? Have you got a study or something that demonstrates?
I haven't said that doshas are resulting in better outcomes. I haven't said that.
But you're just saying we should be open to it.
Yeah, we should just test it. All I'm saying is
we should
just
test it then. I don't have a yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. Test it, but I just don't. Yeah. I think we should.
But
be
don't
cautious.
Call it pseudoscientific until we know that it is.
But currently, it is pseudoscientific, right? Like, there's no meaningful data or study that substantially backs up the idea.
But there is. And the problem is that I would argue they're weaker and they're biased. But that doesn't mean there's no empirical
it's pseudoscientific. Yeah, it's pseudoscientific, right?
No, I would say with most pseudoscience,
you've got an Ayurvedic like institution of medicine that's done a study and says, "Oh yeah, this is fine, this works," right? But actually, when you get into the meat and potatoes of the study, it has like a number of issues with it. Say that don't mean it isn't up to the standard that you would expect from say science. So that is what would make it pseudoscientific to me, anyway.
So I would say like pseudoscientific to me is making extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence.
Well, it doesn't have to be. No. It doesn't have to be extraordinary claims. It can just be. It can be any claim. It could be any claim.
No, that's a marker of pseudoscience. So that's like an indicator we use. So like one issue with doshas that makes it seem more pseudoscientific is that they make pretty extraordinary claims, and there doesn't seem to be extraordinary evidence. There's weak evidence to back up extraordinary claims, which is sus, right? And I'm saying it's sus. I'm not saying it's not sus. Then we have to test it more. They're making these claims, but if they're right, we should find out, because what happens if they are right and their extraordinary claims are borne out in the science? Well, now we have a whole new method of treating people, which will just be better for society.
But no, my understanding of it is like, the reason that I would call Ayurveda pseudoscience is they've got studies and they've got these different institutions that are looking into it. But actually, when you get into the nitty gritty, they aren't rigorously following the scientific method, or there's some problems with methodology or something like that. And that's where the explanation of it as pseudoscience comes in. If there was like a substantive study that proved some aspect of Ayurveda, then at that point, it's not Ayurveda as a whole that is said, oh yeah, well that's A-OK, that's science now. It's that aspect of it that has got some scientific validity that we then test, right? But we would never, there's nothing, I don't think, ever that's going to happen unless there was some hardline scientific proof that dosha is absolutely 100% based on our genetic makeup. At that point, maybe there might be some validity to it and we'd stop calling it pseudoscience. But as it stands, it is pseudoscience.
I don't know, I guess, like, I would say it's definitely pseudoscientific in nature. But the problem is that, like, if we call something just pseudoscience, we've already just labeled that it's bad, right? That it's not valid, because we've done that with homeopathy. But the reason why we can so confidently say homeopathy is pseudoscience is because we've done the testing, whereas we just haven't with doshas, not enough.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but the problem you've got with this argument is I could come up with literally any insane statement, right? I could say that if I were to eat my bed sheets right now, it's going to cure cancer, right? And then you're going to say, that's absurd, that sounds ridiculous. And I say, well, you haven't scientifically tested it yet. At least give it a chance to be tested before you say it's ridiculous.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, that's the process of science. I'm not saying doctors should be recommending to everyone to eat bed sheets based on that.
Right, but if I said to you, I'm going to eat my bed sheets to cure cancer, your response would be, okay, well, we're not sure if it works or not. Let's just scientifically test it before we make any claims about it. Or did denigrate the idea of that? Right.
If somebody's willing to do the research on it, yeah, we may as well.
Okay.
Especially if we have like 7 doctors. So not just like random schmucks saying it, but we have 7 to 8 doctors that we believe to be experts in the field, that we broadly trust their assumptions, and they have clinical experience of being like, holy shit, guys, Giga Chad, eating blankets cured 7 of my clients' cancer. That would be crazy. We should probably test it. But if just like a random schmuck who's like on the street, like peddling and being like, eat my blankets, we don't have, like, that's part of why we value expertise and authorities and clinical experience for hypothesis generation.
Okay. I just would have, I guess I'm slightly different. I would have a healthy dose of skepticism towards something like that. If there was some sort of scientific merit or claim that came out that pointed towards it, great. But until it does, I'm going to view it with disdain. The idea that eating your bed sheets can cure cancer, I'm going to view that with disdain, and I think it's going to be stupid. And then, hey, I guess I'll look like an idiot if it turns out that actually it does help cure cancer. But
yeah, and at an individual level, that's totally fine. It's just like when we're encouraging people to engage in anti-scientific thinking, that's probably not as helpful.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, was there anything else?
You don't have to, because I always want to do the meta conversation. So feel free to say no. I'm curious why you said that I accused you of being racist when I was really trying to be careful of explicitly saying that I don't think you're racist. Like I was trying to go above and beyond to make it clear that I wasn't, and maybe I could have done more. But I know, like, it seemed like you got upset, which is fair if you feel like somebody's accusing you of being racist and you're not.
I just thought,
and you've been accused of that a fair bit, so that's also fair.
Sure.
That it's like kind of a raw spot. I'm just surprised
it's not that it's a raw spot. It's just it's a strategy that some people can engage in sometimes, where they'll just mention the word or bring it up in some context. And even if you aren't directly accusing the person of that, the association is made enough in some people's minds that, just bringing in the concept of racism somehow playing into my thinking in some way or being an outcome of my thinking, that then gets attached to me, even though I don't think that that's true. That's all it is, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. And if it's worth saying for like you versus on mine, I don't think Chud's racist. I don't think you've engaged in anything necessarily racist at this point. I mean, if there's more evidence that comes out of you being racist, I'll probably call you a racist. But like at this point,
that's fine. I don't mind being called racist. I don't mind being called racist at all. Like if someone wants to call me a racist, they're welcome to. And if you think I'm a racist,
you got upset because you felt like I was engaging in like bad rhetoric faith, basically, like trying to get a gotcha by just using big names.
Well, no, I don't think you were even doing that. as such. I just think, yeah, I just question why you would bring it up at all, because I just don't think it was relevant to what we were discussing. But that's fine if you thought it was relevant and it wasn't an attempt to do that, to sort of associate with me in any particularly meaningful way. Then yeah, that's fine.
Right. Similarly, I was kind of surprised that you kind of like accused me of lots of things that I didn't feel like I was doing, like patronizing you, when I was just asking more or less, how are you making these authoritative claims about the nature of the scientific method, hypothesis generation, without actually knowing
Do you
the
think
method
I'm
of
making
hypothesis
authoritative
generation.
claims? Like, what do
Oh,
you
you
mean?
definitely say things with your chest. Say them very confidently. I would say probably a lot of the people that watch you
I
view
mean,
you
yeah,
as like,
just listen.
you're
Just
pretty confident in
just
what
because
you
I
believe.
read some book doesn't mean that I don't understand the concept of you have patients, right? And you notice some things within your patients, you notice it across the board, and you decide to do a study off the back of it. Like, just because I don't know the terminology or the books or whatever, doesn't mean that I don't understand the basic concept of what we're talking about. And then when you asked me the thing, you acted like, what don't you know? And it was kind of patronizing. But that's fine. I don't, it's
But
whatever. It's water
I
under the
remember
bridge.
you said, yeah, but I remember you said case studies are useless. Like you kind of made this authoritative claim about a scientific method, right? And then
But
when I
no,
was like,
what I
hold
mean,
up,
okay, but what I
do you
mean
know
is,
the
okay,
scientific
no,
method
wait,
here?
wait, wait,
And then
wait.
you
But what I
didn't,
mean,
right?
okay,
Which I think was
okay,
fair.
okay. But what I'm saying is, case studies can only be used to fuel, like a broader study, to find out if something works. You wouldn't use a case study in and of itself to justify anything beyond, hey, we need to look into this further.
Right, but the specific claim is case studies are useless is an authoritative claim about, I would argue, in this case, you were making an authoritative claim about the empiricism of it, which isn't actually borne out in the scientific method. And you didn't know it. And you felt like, my issue is like, you felt like I was patronizing you, which I really genuinely wasn't. I was trying to understand. You're making these really authoritative claims. Like, is there a misunderstanding happening where I'm operating from some set of knowledge that you're not privy to, and therefore we're just literally missing each other?
Sure. Okay. So the point, when I say it's useless, right, what I mean is that if you just look at a case study, all it can really do is be used to support like moving it forward down the process. It doesn't mean anything in itself to point to any, like you wouldn't be able to use it to justify a certain treatment or something like that, right?
Right.
I think in the context, like that's what I meant, right? Like I appreciate that like case studies can be used and collated in order to fuel broader studies, of course, but like in and of itself, it doesn't really do much beyond that, and it wouldn't be used to justify like a clinical procedural treatment or something.
Right, which is a much more like nuanced take, but I guess like it doesn't feel like that's what you're
Right.
engaging
we were
in, and
in
it's
the
like
middle
it's
of like a
interesting that you're
fractious
like,
discussion, right?
yeah,
Like,
that's fair. That's fair. It's interesting that you're getting like really mad at like calling these things like blanket pseudoscience and like whatnot, but it feels like sometimes you're engaging in this rhetoric in like a similar style, which I don't think is because like, maybe it's just because like it sells, which is fair enough. It's just like, I don't know. I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt.
Just to be
but,
clear,
like,
listen, right? Yes, if you want to see like me at my most sensible and serious talking about this issue, I made a video where I cut out all of the memes, all of the jokes, and everything like that, right? So
Yeah.
that's available to watch. In my other coverage, yeah, I'm going to be a bit fractious, and my apologies to you if obviously I got a bit fractious with you, and apologize for that. But I feel like you were sort of acting in a kind of patronizing way, and yeah, that was it. And I don't think I don't understand what you're talking about, but you're acting like I didn't understand what you were talking about. Whereas the point I was making wasn't that you can't use a case study for anything, and if it came across like that, that's an error on my part for not expressing that properly. But my point was that like, you can't say this is scientifically backed as a treatment or an idea about how medicine works and point to a single case study, which is what Dr. K has done on one occasion. You would need to point to something which has got a much broader perspective and a much more totality of evidence to say this is scientifically backed.
Yeah. And like, just to be clear, like, I think you're broadly like a good guy. I think for the most part, you engage in good faith. I was very surprised when you like accused me of like gish galloping and that I was like lecturing at you and stuff, because it's just like, like for sure, I got annoyed at one point and I got a little bit condescending, like 100%, just like you also engage in that. It was surprising, and I felt like when you made those claims, I wasn't doing those things. I think I got more heated after you made those claims, if I'm being honest.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I said what is that, and you were like, what you don't know? Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, you know, I haven't been like completely polite to you this whole conversation. I accept that, but yeah, that's what happens in these conversations. I've got no bad blood with you.
That's fair. Okay, I guess I don't know if you have much more to say. I guess like I just want to be careful about not being like dogmatically, like science is beautiful because of its like openness to ideas. That's why science is fucking phenomenal. And science always gets quashed when we get dogmatic and religious about it. When we start making really extreme religious claims that aren't borne out in evidence, right? It's kind of like, remember, I don't know if you probably know like the famous study around stress and ulcers, and there's a whole bunch of people that believe stress was just, I'm sure you are aware of that, right? And the whole medical establishment just laughed at these Australian researchers for years because they're like, no, it's caused by this bacteria. And they're like, no. And then they were just like, fuck this shit. And then they gave themselves an ulcer and then drank their shit to treat it, and it fixed, right? I think they drank the bacteria itself, got ulcers, and then they also treated it with antibacterials, right? Sure. And so I think what happened in that case, and it happens all the time in the scientific, like the science as like this amorphous thing is like a beautiful thing. The institution and how it bears out is varied, you know, because it's humans are involved in it, right? But the same like dogma, I would say it's almost like religious scientific dogma that basically laughed these two researchers off the stage, they were actually actively preventing a breakthrough in science. And all I'm saying is Ayurveda's come up with some pretty good treatments that literally revolutionize. They create they are institutionalizing potentially a new wave of therapy, which is kind of crazy. So it's like, what if the fact that they came up with these, maybe it's just random chance, or maybe they're onto something, and we should figure out what those are and not toss the baby out with the bathwater, because we could do demonstrable good for the world if we can advance the science forward. And it feels like sometimes when we're talking about like Ayurveda and Dr. K, particularly in Manifesto, it felt more like dogmatic science versus like free open science.
Well, the reason I was so frustrated with Dr. K when I made that is because he was making like claims that just weren't scientifically supported or backed, and claiming that they were. That's the issue that I had. If he'd come on and been a lot more couched and guarded in the language that he uses about Ayurveda, then I probably wouldn't have cared so much. But he comes on and makes these bombastic, bold claims they're backed by science when they're not. That's the issue. Yeah,
that's super fair. That's the frustration you feel, Dr. K, around that stuff, super valid. Not questioning that at all. I think your frustration about it is super valid.
So what is the issue you're getting at then, in terms of like being dogmatic or something with the science?
Just, I think in your frustration, and anyone's frustration does, there's actually really good research about like, as you get like more emotionally charged by things, your capacity to actually like use your slow rational mind basically goes out the window pretty quickly, which sucks. Is just like, I think because of that, we've engaged in the past in dogmatic scientific like rhetoric. And because you have this public platform, I want to encourage you to like not encourage your viewers or yourself to engage in dogmatic scientific thinking. I mean, like, let's just throw it all out. It's fucking garbage because it's racist or whatever it is. Like, we don't want to use these buzzwords to throw it all out, when it's like there are little pieces that are valuable and it's worth testing, and throwing out everything that's garbage and telling people not to do it. Like, I'm all for that.
Sure. I mean, you know, obviously I do state very clearly, like, I'm not a scientist. I'm an entertainer primarily.
But you're smart. Like, you're really smart, and people look up to you, and they should. Like, you're not a dumbass. Like, this is why when you're like, what's your credentials? It's like, I don't want to do appeal to authority. I'm not interested in that, because I actually think there's an issue with academics just being like, I'm an authority, so just listen. And it's like, well, yeah, but you can find a PhD to say anything, right? That's why I'm saying, like, these journals, yeah, they've got University of Texas doing research on it, but it's still connected to this Journal of Ayurvedic Medicine. So like, that's kind of sus, right? I want to, like, I guess, like, maybe to some extent be like, you have valid positions. I think you have based takes a lot of time. I watch your content. I am for sure a Chudian as far as like your content. We have good bants. Yeah. So like, just to be clear, like, I think you're dope. I think you're precisely what Twitch needs, and I just like wanted to like give you the caution of being like, don't get scientifically dogmatic, because you're like, I probably wouldn't be having this conversation with other individuals necessarily. But like, I read through your Dr. K, like I read through your whole document, and I should have said this when I began. It's so well done. Like, it's just really well organized. Like, I was like, damn, like I should
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, one thing I will accept is that, yeah, there's times, you know, particularly outside of that manifesto video where I talk about stuff and I am bombastic, and I mean, you know, I've said some crazy things about stuff
Which
on
I
stream.
can appreciate. Agitation, your views have been exploding recently, and it's like, I don't know what you're doing differently, but it's fucking working for you. Like, kudos to you. I just don't want you to get black-pilled on debate, which I think is easy to happen on Twitch, but I think you're a good faith actor, and I appreciate that, and I really value that, and I want to protect our little, what did we call ourselves? The tainted leftists. Like, I want to protect our little hovel, and not kill each other by infighting.
Yeah, sure. You know, and you know, these things do get fractious sometimes. And I am, you know, listen, I'm admittedly like a hothead, and I don't deny that at all. And
it's why we love you, Chud, because you give some of the best takes, but because of that, sometimes you give not the greatest takes either. That just happens. But I mean, it's going to happen to me. I'm sure there's clips of me already that are pretty dog shit takes because I was just mad and I just said dumb shit that wasn't nuanced. Like, that shit happens. Just, let's
yeah, sure.
Let's not get rooted in dogmatic science.
No, sure. I mean, if anyone ever was to send me something and say, hey, Chud, you said this specific thing on stream and it's wrong, not just in my opinion, you're going about it in the wrong way. It's wrong. Here's evidence that it's wrong. Yeah, I would say, okay, I got this wrong. In fact, it happened live the other day. I was looking at the definition for POCD off the back of Mr. Girl's Convo, and I misunderstood, and I thought it was someone who is a nonce and has OCD, and someone in chat said, no, Chud, you've got it wrong. I read the article further. I was like, oh, no, sorry, I got it wrong. It's actually this. So, like, if I say something that's just wrong, yeah, I'm always willing to, you know, say I was specifically wrong about this point. But if it's about like tone or it's about something like that, like if you don't, not you, but just broadly, if people don't like it, then that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, obviously,
yeah, you're not trying to be nice on the platform. You're trying to be accurate. Broadly.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if I said something wrong, fine. If people don't like my style or they think I've said something wrong, fine. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's fair enough, I guess. And I'll just be careful. Yeah, sure, not to like, in a rage, say something that's wrong and is bad, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And just like, all I'm saying is, like, don't encourage yourself or your audience to engage in dogmatic scientific thinking, which, to be honest, I'm still saying, I think you did. And I think you engaged in a little bit in our conversation, but I do think we moderated when you understood. I really am not trying to be a bad faith actor and talking to you.
Okay. What specifics, though, do you mean, I guess, is what I'm trying to...
I'm kind of still trying to like root back at being like, yeah, but like Ayurveda is just pseudoscience. And it's like, but there are practices within Ayurveda that just aren't. And so we just like, how do we call the general
I believe
group?
It to be pseudoscience. I believe it to be pseudoscience, though. That's the problem. I'm not gonna.
But then it's just logically inconsistent, right? If the general group, so say the general group is like birds, right? And then within it, so it would be Ayurveda, and there's lots of things within Ayurveda. And if you say all Ayurveda is pseudoscience, it implies that everything under that category is also pseudoscience, which is untrue. There are pieces within the Ayurvedic category that are empirically sound. So you can say Ayurveda seems to be broadly pseudoscientific, maybe like, I don't know the percentage, right? But there's a lot of Ayurvedic practices that are pseudoscientific. That seems to be also borne out in the data. But there are Ayurvedic practices that are empirically backed at this point.
I mean, it just seems like you're asking me to maybe just amend a bit what I'm saying. I don't know. It just... Like,
yeah, but just with Dr. K should probably amend a bit what he's saying to be more accurate.
Right, but I'm not like a doctor and I don't present myself as a doctor, so the onus is on him much more to do it, right?
Why? You both have public platforms. In this case, I'm concerned about the public platform, not about the doctor.
Okay, but that's integral to it, right? If someone presents themselves as a doctor and makes claims about medical science, they're going to take that more seriously than me making a claim about medical science, right?
So if I say medicine was pseudoscience because medicine also came up with phrenology, would that be accurate?
Well, no, because phrenology was actually the lack of the scientific method that resulted in phrenology.
Okay, what if I say allopathic medicine is pseudoscience because the origin of the name and the origin of allopathic medicine was in homeopathy? Would it be true to say allopathic medicine is pseudoscience?
Well, no, because that's just the name of something that isn't material to what's happening within the medicine itself.
No, I mean homeopathy was the founding. They were doing research. That's how
got nothing to
allopathic.
Do with yeah, but that's just a word for it. That's got nothing to do with the fundamental
No,
foundations of.
No, it's a general category. It's the same thing. It's the same thing as
I mean,
the Ayurvedic
I, to be honest with you, it tends to be people who engage in pseudoscience that use the term allopathy or whatever it is. It doesn't tend to be. It's not a term that's used outside of, generally speaking, pseudoscientific kind of people anyway.
I mean, allopathic medicine isn't dominantly used anymore. We just call it modern medicine, but allopathic medicine just means empirically based medicine, which is what we do.
Well, yeah, I'll just call it empirically based medicine then, I guess. Like, that's just a name for it. That's got nothing to do with it. I feel like we're looping back around to the disagreement we've got.
Right.
I mean, based on what I've read, based on what I've seen, most organizations refer to it as like pseudoscience, on the basis that it doesn't have substantive and meaningful medical backing, but it presents itself as having substantive and meaningful backing, just like Dr. K has done. So to me, I would call it pseudoscience. If there are practices at work, great, fantastic, we can look at those. But yeah, I don't really think there's a problem with me calling it pseudoscience in the way that you're describing.
That's fair. We might just have to agree to disagree.
Maybe
there. I don't think there's any way, because I think at this point we're now getting into a splitting hair territory, which no one enjoys and is never actually fruitful.
Sure. Well, listen, let's end it on friendly terms for now.
Yeah.